PC, we'll turn it over to you. I've said to eternity with infinite, loving, precious God. You have to hear the bad news about the thing that this guy Reagan is not even afraid of, a burning hell, which kind of like that's how our mind works as human beings. We know from the opposite. We have that comparison with everything was just one way. How could we really know? So the love of the Lord through the people.
I'm trying to be nice, but there's no shortage of fools. People who rush on where angels fear to tread. I mean, people aren't afraid of all kinds of things, like the guy who goes in his neighbor's backyard gets bit by the pit bull or Rottweiler. He wasn't afraid, but he still got bit.
Yep.
That's just dumb. But you know what? Trust me, the fear will come when they meet God face to face. And I've taken great amusement, and I don't really enjoy this, but the people who say, I get in God's presence, well, I'm going to tell him why I had reasons not to believe in him. Which was like, I'll say you were wrong because you're in his presence, and I'm going to tell him a thing or two. Like, you're not going to tell him anything. You're going to be scared witless. You're going to be like Belteshazzar who wet his pants, basically.
Knees cracking together. And
that's really what it means. It's a nice way in Hebrew of saying he wet his pants.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you that. Now we're getting pretty graphic on this broadcast, so if you want to join us in our graphicness, please call us at 888-995-5552. The ungraphic Eric will set your call up, not hang up on you at all. 888-995-5552. Everything else is Bible Info Brokers. Brian.
No, I don't know if you want to go to the other call first. We have another question from Facebook from Philip. So
let's take the call from Timothy and Lake Balboa. Then we can get on into the break and get that on the other side. Let's go with Lake Balboa. Timothy, thanks for holding on and calling in.
Hello. My question is part 2 of the question I was trying to get across last week.
Okay.
And it's basically, the very essence of my question is that does morals change depending on circumstances or situations? And the 2 examples I kind of hope that you could address is the first part is allegedly, since the vaccine is it's stored at negative 70 degrees, I feel from that evidence alone, it probably does have human stem cells. And I was listening to this one Christian show, and one of the guests on the Christian show was like, well, if it is fetal, like aborted fetus stem cells, it's okay. I guess it's the greater good or whatever. I mean, in the basic justification from this person. And the other part of the question is it good for Christians to be united with so-called conservative homosexuals in different organizations? So that's kind of the idea behind my question.
Gotcha.
It's morals change depending on circumstances.
As opposed to liberal homosexuals, right? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
PCH,
Right.
PCH, why don't you tackle this, brother?
Well, there's several issues, and the only thing they have in common is ethics.
Right.
No, and there's some great books, like Norman Geisler wrote a book years ago called Christian Ethics, and it's one of my favorites. There's a book written by Louis Pojman, Pojman. Now, he wasn't a believer, but he wrote a book discovering right and wrong. When I taught ethics, I've often used that book as well as Geisler's because he's so clear in explaining different ethical systems. So there are Christians, and you mentioned a couple things, and we'll see how far we can get because the questions get really involved when you've got at least three to four things going on, and it'll take me time to sit through 1 and 2, and we can always have part 3, Timothy, to come back, to be honest. So No, ethics don't change from the Christian perspective. We're not relativists. There's what's called epistemological relativism, metaphysical, but we're talking about ethical or moral relativism. And that's the idea that there's no truth or moral principles that apply to the big four, as I call them. The big four are all times, all people, all places, all circumstances. That is, one more time, all times, all people, all places, all circumstances. A relativist, whether of the mild sort or a radical relativist, and there are gradations of it, say, no, it's contingent. Things change from time to time, or if not time to time, place to place, or among various people, even in the same place, or among different cultural groups or subcultural groups in the same place at the same time. That's called relativism. Again, it changes depending on the time, people, places, and the circumstances. So what would the, let's say, murder under the exact same circumstances for one person would not be for another person? And that I'm going to argue is not a biblical view. That is the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age from the German of our culture. That kind of like, you have your views, I have my views. I hold a different view. We can both be right. Of course, you can both be wrong. So, no, we're not relativists, and I would argue we shouldn't be. Most Christians, in fact, are not utilitarians. Utilitarianism, which was definitely clarified the most by someone named Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham, kind of also the father of what's called legal positivism. He was directly rejecting the natural law views of someone named William Blackstone, for example. He's an English chap. And he's really kind of the father, the origin. Not that he was the first utilitarian, but he certainly was the clear sonnet to codify it. Utilitarianism basically said there's no action that's inherently right or wrong. It depends on the consequences. And often what's applied is called the principle of utility, which is something is right or wrong based on whether it produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The greatest good for the greatest number of people. So let's say the former Soviet Union, okay, so we kill off 5 million people, but we take their food, their grain, the crops they produce, but they're not good. Comrades are not good. Totalitarians, so we take their food, starve them off, and we save 100 million who are good Marxists. That's okay, because obviously 100 million versus 5 million is a no-brainer to them. In fact, the classic example called the thought experiment is, what if we could take all the suffering, let's talk mental, emotional, physical, whatever type of suffering there is, that ever has, currently exists, or will exist, all the suffering that people have ever gone through, are going through, or will go through, what if we could put that on one little person? What if we have this cute little 7-year-old, this little girl who's as cute as a button, and we say, she's going to suffer to all of eternity, horrifically, but that's the bad news. But the good news is the rest of us will never experience any suffering. Well, hopefully you go, there's something wrong with that. But according to utilitarianism, that would be the right thing to do. It would be a no-brainer, because the billions and billions of people who have, do, or will exist all go scot-free, if you will. So lying isn't wrong per se, murder isn't wrong per se, pick anything. It all depends on the consequences. In fact, under ethics, there's what's called, for example, deontological ethics, and this is a category called consequentialist. That is why, because the rightness or wrongness of the action is not based upon its actual inherent nature, but it's based upon the consequences. What are the consequences? If good comes from this, then it's a good thing. Also, it's called teleological, from the Greek word teleos, which means the goal or purpose, the end result. So it's often called technically teleological or consequentialist ethics. It's the same difference. And utilitarianism, there's different types, act, rule. But most Christian ethicists don't hold to it. There are some. A lot of Christians hold to this, because I'd argue they don't really know ethics. They don't really understand it. I look at, it's one of the things I do. I teach graduate students. I'm like, I have to work them through these issues so that they at least understand the problems with many of their ethical viewpoints, how problematic they are. So that's a lot to be said. So we need to come back to the two other actual cases you mentioned, actual examples. But before I talked about that, and that really needs to be done at another time to be fair to other listeners,
Exactly.
I needed to put all this in place.
Well, that's
You can always go back and listen to this again if you go, wow, this is too much.
Indeed.
Well, it's actually, from my perspective, it's just a little, but it is a lot if you're not used to it. But go back and when the broadcast is posted up on our website, go back and listen to this several times until maybe it starts to sink in, if you will.
Yeah, Timothy hears the music, so he knows that we're going to let you go. Timothy, thank you. And please do check out what was just said, and then again, call back next week, and let's get into part 3, because it's very interesting, very necessary. So if you listen to Living by the Word Ministries presentation of Bible Information Brokers, we'll be back after these messages. Call us right now. Eric has some open lines at 888-995-5552. Everything else is Bible Info Brokers.